friends, what is up and welcome back to my channel. As you guys can tell from the title of today's video, I wanted to talk to you about the book that I read last week. Yes, I only read one book, but it was a really standout book for me and I am really excited to talk to you about it. But to start today's video off, today's question of the day is, what is your favorite kind of setting for a book? For me, my favorite setting would have to be like an island setting where things are really cut off, preferably I would say sort of rainy. Most recently, I would say like Wilder Girls, Summer of Salt, Wicked Deep, those kinds of books. That setting, even though those aren't necessarily like my favorite books of all time, that is my favorite kind of setting in a book. And I know a lot of people can agree, but let me know down below your favorite. But I'm going to get started and talk about the book that I read this week because I do have a lot to say. The book that I read is Sufficiently Advanced Magic. I actually borrowed this from I had this on my Kindle. I did borrow the second one from Kindle Unlimited. If you guys would like to read them, I do believe both are available through Kindle Unlimited. I do eventually plan on purchasing them, but these books are massive. They're 600 and some pages, and basically it follows our main character Corin, and he goes into something called the Serpent Spire. Everyone in his community does enter this spire. It has multiple levels, and basically when you are able to pass through the first level the first year that you go, you get something called an attunement, which is a type of magic that you are able to use. Now, in this review or wrap up, I'm not really going to focus a whole lot on like the secondary characters and things like that. I really just want to give you an overall feel for the book because, like I said, the book is pretty large. But when he enters the tower, something actually happens that is a little bit out of the norm. He ends up finding an exit to basically a prison, and in the prison there are 3 people, and he does release all 3 of them. And there are these people basically that are super powerful with their attunements that are essentially gods. They become gods to them. And he ends up having to fight one of them with the help of the other 3 people that are there. One is a young boy who's basically asleep the entire time. Another is a woman who is a little bit shifty. You kind of find out later on why. And another is an incredibly powerful man. And so they end up running. The woman takes the young boy and flees, and Corin is left with the incredibly powerful other character who is essentially fighting the god, and then he also escapes. And he is given an attunement that is not the favorite of his family. His family wants him to have more of like a fighting attunement, but the one that he's given is actually one that I would really enjoy, and it's the ability to create magical objects. And each person, after they do complete the tower and they are able to leave, they either go to the school or they go straight into military service. So if you do kind of fail and you don't get your attunement, you go straight into required military service. For everyone else, they are sent to the school, which is where Corin goes, where he meets a bunch of other, I would say like previous friends and new friends at the same time. But the kicker is that Corin actually gets kind of roped into this conspiracy that is happening throughout the story. And that's what a lot of the story follows, especially because Corin's older brother, when he entered the tower, does not come back out. And this was years and years previously, and he is presumed dead. But Corin is of the opinion that his brother is actually alive. Now, as the first novel of the book, the reason why I said I didn't really want to focus on like other characters and stuff, while I think that the other characters are enjoyable and they do lend a lot to the story, including I would say Corin's like illegitimate sister, and then old friends of his, and then also like new friends that he develops and like the teachers and stuff. I think they all add a lot to the story, but most of the story is really Corin trying to figure out if his brother is alive and how his attunement works. This is one of those novels that lends a lot of backstory and build up, I think, for the later ones. There is a lot of just school. It's very much so just a magic school. You get to have multiple classes that you get to go with Corin to. You get to kind of learn a lot about their world, which is what I really like about this novel because it focuses on a lot of the war that happens within it. There are a bunch of other nations that are like surrounding where they live and the war that has torn them apart. There is a lot of talk of their attunements and how they apply to like trying to build up their country, because a lot of people, if you fail out of class, you are sent basically to immediately join the military. So that is something that kind of looms above Corin. But what I really like about the book, aside from that, is the overall, I think for me, like the conspiracy that is happening. There's a lot of questions that are raised in this novel as you're reading it, like what part Corin really has in things. And at one point in time, the god that he was a part of the fight, I mean, he's a child when it happens, but the fight that he is aware of and therefore when it is happening, comes to him and says, the woman that fled, I need you to find her. And if you don't find her, we're basically going to come and wipe out the entire nation that you live in. because he's trying to find his brother. And so there's a bit of like secrecy throughout the entirety of the novel that really I feel like keeps you on your toes at the same time. I think Corin as a character is really funny. That's another thing that I love about characters in fantasy novels. If they are funny, I think that it, for me, just makes the story that much more enjoyable. I like really serious, like older, like mentor characters, and then I like the really funny, like sassy, like younger characters. I will say this is one of the first novels I read in a long time that had a much younger main character that was male. I tend to not really enjoy those kinds of books. I think that I find it kind of hard to enjoy them and relate to them, and I don't mean because I can read books where obviously the character is very different from me, but I feel like there is oftentimes too much emphasis on the fact that the character is much younger, and while you know how old the characters are in this book, and it is brought up a lot of the teachers call them children and things like that, I feel like they also have an air of being slightly more mature, especially because like with Corin and his illegitimate sister, they are basically from a noble house, and that is spoken about a lot in the novel. So it does make them seem a little bit older, and Corin does seem a little bit more mature. Another thing that I thought was fucking fantastic about this book is that Corin is asexual. So he does not have the desire or want to be physically intimate with anyone, and it's done in a way just where he a couple of times notices that someone is flirting with him, and he's like, what's going on? And you start kind of getting an inkling of what's happening, and then another male character at one point in the book actually asks him to go to this ball with him, and Corin says, you know, I am okay with going with you, like I think you're attractive. He's like, but the whole touching thing, like I'm not really a fan of that. And the other character is like, yeah, okay, that makes sense, that's totally fine. And I love that, and I love that the male like love interest in this book, it's very it just happens. It's very fluid in the story, and that's just the type of world that they live in. I feel like for me, it's like the world that I wish we lived in, where people didn't bat an eyelash about who people loved, and it's not emphasized at all. Like once they sort of establish that they're going together, you sort of forget about it until later on in the book, and I think that's really cool. If you're looking for diversity and representation that isn't like forced, I think this would be really good. I actually had a friend who was reading this book a long time ago, and they were like, oh no, I know where the author's going with this, and they were kind of disappointed and let down by that, but I actually loved it, and I think it is very realistic for me. And one of the reasons why I really like this novel is that if you are writing a fantasy novel, or you are writing like a sci-fi novel, or like a futuristic kind of novel, you are able to take liberty to include those kinds of things, because I feel like that is how the world would work. You know what I mean? Like if you have the ability to write those kinds of characters into a story, why wouldn't you? So I really enjoyed that aspect of it. Like I said, it was really fluid and didn't feel forced at all, and I just absolutely loved it. But this book overall, I think for me, I gave it 4 stars only because at some points in time, like a lot of the novel is they focus on trying to raise the mana levels of the characters. So as you're reading it, you don't get anyone else's perspective. You only see things from Corin's perspective, but you do get to kind of hear input about the other characters, and a lot of it is of their training and trying to become more powerful and once again raise their mana levels. So there's a lot of that in it, and sometimes it does become kind of repetitive. If you're not a fan of the school setting, which I normally am not, but I did really enjoy it in this book, I don't know if you'd like this because a lot of it is, but I think the way the story kind of goes later on, like the way the ending of the story is, I think it's worth, even if you have to kind of set aside like your predisposition to like school settings, I think that it's worth it, because the overall like arching story of this novel I think is incredible. I love, like I said, like the sneakiness of it, and like the betrayals that happens with some of the characters, and like the secret societies and stuff. Like they present that there is a secret society at the beginning of the book, so I think it's really cool to try to piece that together. There's a little bit of a mystery going on, and like discovering where Corin's brother is, if he is still alive, like all of that. I really like it, and like the found friends, I really like that as well. So if you're looking for a really good fantasy novel that does have representation, that has great, I would say, like supporting characters and a hilarious main character, I think that you would really like this novel. It is a fantasy, like I said, it is an epic fantasy. It is 600 and some pages. I am getting ready to read the second one hopefully this week. I am really excited for that. I'm going to be reading it while I'm also reading The Hunger Games for the first time, so we'll see how that goes. But overall, I truly love this, and like I said, I want a little bit more, or I guess a little bit less repetitiveness from the book, but overall I really liked it, and I am excited to continue on with the series. Definitely going to be one of my new favorites. But let me know down below the last book you read. If you've read this, let me know what you thought of it, because when I started reading it, so many people were like, oh my god, yeah, I read that and liked it. So if you liked it, let me know down below what you thought of it, or your favorite part If you haven't read it, let me know if you think this is something that you would be interested in. And once again, let me know your favorite book setting, because I like to see what people really enjoy from the books that they are reading. But I love you guys so much. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.